Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending where you are. On behalf of the IDRiM event organizing committee, I'm delighted to welcome you to today's IDRiM Café. So my name is Huan Liu. I'm an assistant professor at Disaster Prevention Research Institute, Twente University. And today's Café is organized by myself and Dr. Fang from University of Twente. And I would like to today's topic is science communication. So science communication, as a researcher, in addition to conduct exceptional research, we are also expected to communicate it effectively to a variety of audience, from scientists to students to policymakers or to police officers. And science communication is a diverse and transdisciplinary field which has undergone rapid evolution in recent years. Therefore, to address the theoretic and practical issues in science communication, today's Café, we will focus on provide a platform to learn about science communication in today's society and exchange ideas between participants in this Café. And we would also like to share skills and experience conducting research and writing journal papers. And overall, we hope to provide insights on how to communicate our research findings in effective manners through a range of channels. So this is an overview of today's Café. So we will have two invited speakers. The first one, Anne. She's assistant professor at the University of Twente, Netherlands. And thank you for accept our invitation. And we will have the second speaker, Professor Fang. He's professor at Toronto Metropolitan University, Canada. And after two presentations, we will open the floor for questions and discussions with audience. And then we will closing the Café after this program. So the first one, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Anne, and she is assistant professor in science communication at the University of Twente. Anne studies the changing relationship between science, technology, and society from a communication perspective. Her research focuses on understanding the society and science relationship. She is an elected member of the Public Communications of Science and Technology Scientific Committee, and she is the co-editor of the book Science Communication, an introduction and author of the Dutch chapter in a free available book Communicating Science, a global perspective, which has over 50,000 downloads. And the floor is yours, and please.
Thank you very much. Shall I share my screen?
Yes, I will.
Okay, good. I will start doing that. Can you now see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I will put it in presentation mode. I will have to look something up. We'll get my notes with it. I think you still see my screen, is it? So, thank you very much. So I would like to thank you first of all for the invitation to invite me for this Café. So yeah, a little bit about my background. Indeed, I'm an assistant professor at the University of Twente in science communication. And together with three other colleagues in the field, we are the four editors of the book, Science Communication and Introduction. I don't know if you see me as well, but I have the book here also in my hand. I will use the book as well as my other experiences from the Netherlands and also experiences from international or European project as an inspiration for today's presentation. And I will highlight several developments in science communication and also focus on the role for the changing role, for example, for researchers in that changing science and society relationship. See if that works, yeah. So actually, in brief, what we do in the book is we argue that the growing interactions between science and technology and society have led to an increased drive to communicate about science, and more recently also to an increased effort to understand how societies make sense of science and technology. And also, in addition to that, in the book we will address efforts to do science communication research to understand better how communication can be done and how people can make sense of science and technology. So, but first I would like to then go to a more introduction to the topic. So if we look at the public domain, we often see controversial topics, and I think also in risk communication you will have experienced that, or risk management, that raise concern. So I have two questions here. What controversial topics are often debated in society? Consider that for yourself a little bit. And also a second question, what topics need to be discussed according to yourself? So you can do that for yourself. And then I will look at the examples I have here. So I have, these are a little bit the European examples. So in the 1990s, there was a big debate about BSE, Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, that could cause Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease for human beings. And this is the picture above is a picture of the British Minister of Agriculture, who was assuring the citizens, people on television, that it was safe to eat beet. And only later they found out that actually it wasn't so safe. And he also had some sad experiences with people in his neighborhood, in his close group of friends dying of Creutzfeldt-Jacobs. And other debates we had in the Netherlands, for example, were about Herman, the bull. This is the bulls. He was a modified bull, and her offspring would have kind of milk that could be used for medicines. And here she is stuffed in the museum. And of course, also European debate was started with Dolly the sheep. So you see that some topics raise concern. We also know that vaccinations raise concern, but it is also the case that some topics do not raise concern or not raise debate. This is an example on the next picture of the Atomium in Brussels, which was built for the World Exhibition in 1959 to foster the prosperity of science and technology. So what are the examples also about? I think they are also about acceptance of technology, if technology or science is accepted or not. And that has to do with trust and credibility in science, in technology, in the researchers, for example, but also has to do with the uncertainty around it. We do not always know for certain what science and technology can bring or what kind of outcomes they can have. We also saw that, for example, during the COVID pandemic, that there was a lot of uncertainty. And this probably you will know about. It also has to do with small risk that can have big consequences. And that is derived from Ulrich Beck's book about the risk of society, which he already said in 1992. So that's quite long ago. What examples also show that there is a role for science and scientific knowledge, and also a role for experts, for the researchers. And what is good to know there in the examples that what experts sometimes think is safe or they have or not. The lay public, the lay audience, do not always agree with that. So their risk perception often differs from the risk perception of experts. And therefore, my conclusion, it has to do with persuasion, it has to do with information and communication as well. So what we can conclude there is that there are other ways of communication needed in relationships that are changing between science and society because of the technological and scientific developments. And maybe it is good to consider why there are those tensions between science and society. And I think I group them always in kind of three categories. So one is that there's critique on the claim of objectivity, of the objectivity of science and research, because science and technology are also part of society. They're part of governmental decisions, also something we saw clearly during the pandemic. And I forgot to type that correctly. There are also tensions because of what I already mentioned, the unfilled expectations about certainty. What people think is certain, or what they expect is not always certain in that sense. And what scientists offer cannot always be certain. And what is also one of the reasons why there is a tension, because there is, if we focus too much on the values of science and the facts of science only, it also diminishes other important aspects in society that play a role, like social cultural values and ethical and moral considerations. So if we go back to the case of the BSE and the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, this was a headline in the time in 1990s when it was playing. It was saying the public just wants the truth about BSE, says the expert. But that was exactly the problem. People didn't know, or the researchers did not know yet, or did not completely know what was the truth. I will now forward, so go forward to 2020, in which Jacinda Ardern from the New Zealand, the Prime Minister, what she said about science communication, because those examples all clearly see that communication plays a role. And what she said in 2020, in the beginning of the pandemic, is that she, well, we of course know that New Zealand took a different course, but in July 2020, she also explicitly emphasized the role of science communicators. She said, without our science communicators to publicly inform, explain, teach, decode, counter misinformation and debate science matters, many would remain in a space where they don't have the information they need, leading to poor choices being made at really crucial time. So there she emphasizes the role scientific knowledge can play in also policy decision making. But we also know that that is not always always the case. And what we see here also in this quote is that it's not only for researchers, there's also a role for science communicators. And that is, of course, science communication. Science communication is a very broad field. It deals both with disseminating information, but also enhancing a critical debate about topics that raise concern or about topics that people are concerned about, for example, vaccinations or climate changes, I would say. It has to do with transmission of information, but also transaction of information. And a lot of different actors can be involved in science communication. It can be done by journalists, science communicators, museum staff members, but also researchers themselves. We are a group of researchers. We are also expected to communicate, science writers. And in that situation, they often can have different roles. They can be intermediary, but also kind of educators. They can be asked to say something as an expert, or to coach people, or if it regards policy decision, to give advice on what to do. And in the communication process, we have to deal with various stakeholders, all those people with different interests and different views on communicating science or on the topic. So it is also influenced, science communication is a broad field because it's influenced by a lot of different research fields, the natural sciences, social studies of science and technology, communication science, education science, but also, for example, risk communication. I have a little bit of background also in risk perception, risk communication. So yeah, what we try to do in the book, we try to address that, and the book is available. I have the link here, and the first chapter is also open access, but the book itself is unfortunately not open access. Yeah, what I would like to emphasize, what we try to show in the book, is that scientific knowledge is the role for scientific knowledge, and within that the world is facing challenges, that knowledge plays a role. And it's important that people deal with that knowledge. In the European Union in 2015, they mentioned it or labeled that as responsible citizenship. Citizens should be able to know something about how society works, but they also should have a kind of level of maths and scientific knowledge to be able to understand what is happening in society and to empower themselves to make considered decisions, so to say. So that is an idea about scientific literacy, which is broader than only having that knowledge. It's also knowing how the scientific process, for example, works. So what does all those developments that I'm discussing mean for the role of researchers? I would say that these are, all the pictures are examples of project I was in myself, that if you look at the communication process, there is a lot possible. You can do a lot in very many different ways. And I think science communication is also good if it's done in many different ways. So there is a wish for a proactive way of engaging publics with openness and transparency. And that can be both top-down or bottom-up communication, especially during the crisis. A crisis, for example, in the first part, you have to communicate more top-down. Although I think it's not only that you, when you tell your audience about your topic, that people will accept it. And I think it's very important to also offer engagement with audience, or engage with your audiences. And then consider that it is good to that you deal with different stakeholders. So in brief, yeah, communication can be done with a rich variety of means. So I have here examples of a winter school we organized in Barcelona, a group of citizens we talked about with their problems, and then we connected them to researchers to see if their problems could be solved. But we also could, I have also been involved in other parts, one example is a kind of play, a card game. And I'm also organizing the science cafes, and that is also a way where you as a researcher can nicely present your research, for example. Next to the science cafe, we also organize a festival where you can see that you can let people experience science and topics in different ways. And people will really like that. But I think as well, it's really important to start that critical dialogue as well. I would like to end with a reference to this book. It was already mentioned in the introduction that it had more than 50,000 downloads. But what is interesting about the book, I think it describes the development of science communication and science communication activities in are in 39 countries in the world, and it is free accessible. And it's really interesting to see how it's done in your own area or in your own country, what happened. And how the notion of science communication and the interest in science communication changed in those years, and what it meant in the political field, for example. And it's also what I do with students. I always ask them to read the chapter of their own country they're from, but also, for example, then from a country from the Netherlands, so they can compare also how science communication developed in those countries, because it's never the same in always the same situation. And I think every situation also brings with it that you can tailor the communication within the own particular context. I think that is very important in science communication. So I would like to leave it with that. Here is my email address if you want to address me, and I will stop sharing the screen.
Thank you so much for Dr. Ann's excellent talk, and thank you for help us in understand like science communication and different ways and means of science communication. I believe there are lots of interesting points which we may discuss later. So the second speaker, I would like to invite Professor Li-Ping Fang. Professor Li-Ping Fang is a full professor of Mechanical and Industry Engineering, Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs and Students Affairs, Faculty of Engineering and Architecture Science at Toronto Metropolitan University in Canada. And he is a fellow of the Canadian Academy of Engineering, Institute of Electronic and Electronics Engineers, Engineering Institute of Canada, and Canadian Society for Mechanical Engineering, as well as the Registered Professional Engineering in Ontario. And he has visited Kyoto many times and old friends for many participants here, I believe. So Professor Fang, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hua, and thank you for the organization and also the invitation. And indeed, it's great to see so many old friends through this Zoom. And it's great to see Professor Okada and Professor Tatano. And as I mentioned that I have always enjoyed my visit to the Kyoto, and also enjoyed all the discussions we had. So that's, I think, now Professor Dijkstra talk about the science communication in general, and also on very nice overview. And I will be limiting my discussion on a particular form of a science communication, and also a particular, in sense, kind of audience. Obviously, when you communicate, you want to know your audience, and you have many different audience. Here, I'm talking about for the researchers in their academic career, you, in sense, publishing in peer-reviewed journals. I think is a very important aspect for the colleagues, especially more young colleagues in terms of their career. So this is I'm talking about, and I think I'm going to do the slideshow. So that's here, and so my talk is about, in sense, more is aiming for the lively journal paper publication form, but obviously, in order to do that, we need to have original research. So that's why I title my talk as Conducting Research and Writing Lively Journal Papers. And I think my university just changed the name in late April 2022. Formerly, we call Ryerson University, but now we call the Toronto Metropolitan University. So we are located, with Toronto in the name probably will be easier to see, obviously, located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So I first want to acknowledge two of my colleagues. A lot of colleagues here probably know Professor Keith Heppel, and also Professor Keith Heppel from University of Waterloo, and also Professor Marcello Papini from my home university. And I had a lot of discussions with obviously many colleagues, but especially with Professor Heppel and Professor Papini on this topic. So obviously, I should acknowledge our discussion and their contributions. And just a little bit about myself. So I received a Bachelor's of Engineering degree in electrical engineering from Tianjin University in Tianjin, China in 1982. Then I did my Master of Applied Science and Doctor of Philosophy or PhD at the University of Waterloo, and I completed, in a sense, my formal education in 1989. So in terms of scientific or archived or left-read journal papers, in sense, the very basic foundation is peer review process, and because recognition by your peers or your colleagues or experts in the field is what really fundamental for the publication of scientific work in left-read journals. And so as here just some cartoons, and basically I think very importantly that when we have manuscript ready, we always have anonymous reviewers, in sense, will be reviewing the work and pointing out or challenging, sometimes challenging your viewpoints. And that's just, I thought it was an interesting cartoon. And here also say, yes, but good luck with getting it peer reviewed. So that's peer. So in terms of outline of my presentation, I first will be briefly talking about, obviously, we need the original research for the work to be presented in papers. And then I will be talk about prepare papers for submission to left-read journals, and also very importantly, revise papers in response to the reviewers' comments. And this is also a very fundamental skills. So first, I think questions: what attributes do we consider a paper to be a good paper? So attributes of good paper, I think, in terms of original research, in terms of journal publications, the first, obviously, research quality. In sense, the paper has to be original and novel. So that's really saying a gap in the existing state of the arts is clearly identified. You need to justify and your originality and novelty based on the gap in the literature or the state of arts. And obviously, technically sound. Obviously, we have a lot of experimental work, field work, or we have more theoretical development, but they have to be technically sound or correct. So good data, modeling, and arguments to construct comprehensive ideas that address the objective. But that's in sense research and in terms of research quality. But another important aspect of a good paper is presentation quality. In sense, we have to have very good lightings and has to be logically organized and well written. And so to all the researchers, in sense, this is really the practice and patience. We really need to practice our, and then clear flow of ideas. So that is, in sense, most important aspects of the a good paper. And so, so in terms of conducting original research, I think here I'm emphasizing, in a sense, original experimental or theoretical research. So we really need to, based on the needs from the real world challenges. So we need to identify a problem from real world challenges or gaps in theoretical development for which a satisfactory solution does not exist. So we need to be clear the needs, and then we need to have original work, develop a methodology to solve the problem. And then we need to use data or case studies to demonstrate that your approach or the approach you developed works better than existing method, and obviously has to be according to certain common criteria in terms of judging your work is better than others. And then you want to generalize your method as much as possible. So in sense, here we're talking about really original work, how you in sense establish your originality and novelty. It is critically important to know the literature in your field, and that in sense to ensure the originality and the novelty. So I think no, so obviously you will be accumulating your research results, and you have a lot of theoretical development, you have experimental result, you have could be case studies, or you could be numerical results, etc. Then obviously, normally we will first submit our works to conferences and to be presented and critiqued during the conference, but afterwards we were expanding the work and to prepare submissions to journals. And obviously, first I have to say, journals have very requirements with respect to formatting, star page limits. And when you are aiming for a particular journal, and you need to follow a journal's requirements closely, otherwise you may not able to be processed by the journals. So here, some journals have very specific guidelines. For example, for the medical journals or life science journals, you often use the introduction, methods, results, and a discussion format. That's a lot of journals will be very clear in instructions, but I would say these are more for the life science or medical journals. And on the engineering side, many do not have any strict section naming rules. and in sense, you will do what you need to present your result. And so in terms of a journal paper, I would say we need to answer the following questions. So first, what is the problem? What is the problem you're studying? Why is it important? What have others done? What is the gap? That first, and then what do you do? In sense, those 5 questions are actually often need to be answered in the introduction. Now, based on my year of experience in doing research, in working with the students, and also serving as the associate editor for a number of journals, when I received the papers, especially for our junior colleagues, these questions are not well addressed. Often we do a good job in sense, how do you do it? In sense, basically you explain all what you did, but you don't really link, or we don't link with the literature well, and really emphasizing the first 5 questions in the introduction. Then obviously we continue with what are the results? Why is your work better? What do we learn? So that is, in sense, I say this is a checklist you want to use in writing the papers. I think I need to. No, here actually I'm really emphasizing again the importance of doing a real great job in the introduction of your paper, and you really need to have a motivation for your research, and why explains the instance particular problem you're studying, why the field is important for different reasons. In engineering side, could be the industrial needs, could be business need, or could be with other researchers. And then you clearly describe the problems that need tackling, and state the problem you're studying, and describe your contributions. Now, see, all these things can be done by 4 or 5 paragraphs, but you really have to put your research or our research in good context in terms of the field. I think because of that, I will not go into details on all the other sections. But then, in sense, time's ready for you to submit the paper. And one thing is, I will say, make sure that following what required by the journals, and basically leading or checking the instructions to authors. No, I think we all submit your papers by obviously online systems. And here I really want to talk about this blind or double blind. And because for the journals, we often have 2 forms of a peer review process. Blinds means that reviewers know the author's identity, but obviously authors will not know who reviewers are. And double blind really means reviewers also do not know who the authors are. And because this, in terms of submission process, often when you're preparing the files, they will be different because you cannot have a acknowledgement or you have information on your research funding, etc. in the manuscript. And so that's, and also journal will be really be communicating, say what format of their peer review process. Yes. Now, so now after you submit your paper, we have as a editorial decisions come after wait often too long. And if with the early works, decision normally come probably in 4 forms. One is accept as is, but that's not likely or very, very rare for first version. And accept was minor revisions, and let's submit after major revisions, and reject. Now, we all have received rejections, so it is not end of the world. It happens to everyone. And you really should be using comments to revise your paper. And then we will be submitting works to another journal. That's often. And some of our, especially our PhD students, they often say, oh, the reviewers do not understand me. Can we appeal to the editor-in-chief? That's that's normally will not have real outcome that you are looking for. Sorry. So now I think I really want just briefly talk about devising the paper. No, I also want to emphasize this is a very important skills. We have to able to answer the questions from our peers. So first things, treat comments by the reviewers professionally. Do not take things personally. And also in this process, be humble. And so address each comments carefully and revise your paper accordingly and take your time. Now, sometimes a reviewer may not capture your intention or misunderstood, but you should take responsibility for not have written clear enough and make revisions to clarify. And so for each reviewer, prepare a separate author's response to reviewers of say number 1, 2, or 3 comments, and detailing your responses and revisions. And clearly indicated comments and response. For example, use different fonts and respond to each comment, then explain what changes and where have been made to address the comments, highlight revisions in the manuscript. I find that I think in the recent years, a lot of journals, when they send the editorial decision back, they have this detailed kind of requirement. I think this has been like, we have been practicing this for many, many years, but this has been becoming a very common requirement that you have to address each comments. And you, if you do not agree, you can have your rebuttal. But in sense, you have to address each comments and also highlight revisions in the manuscript. So no, it will be a good idea to try to make at least one change for every comment. Now, if revisions being suggested are unreasonable, explain your reason, look for a way to compromise to at least partially address or appease the reviewer. So that's, I think, lately is a skill, a very important skill to be accumulated as a researcher. Now, given the time, I think I will end my presentation here.